It's always hard just to follow Warren, who's an outstanding speaker, my boss, and I said this in private to him and in public to all of you. And it's not bonus time, by the way. I will just focus on general trends in emerging markets, but trying just to deepen my thoughts on our view on Latin America. Probably just separate my remarks in three segments. One, talking about context. Two, talking about our view. And three, talking about flows. In terms of context, I think what Warren mentioned is very important. I can just bore you to death with numbers, but clearly the world has changed structurally, and the fundamental shifts that we're seeing in the global economy are also applying, to Latin America in particular. But just to be very specific, the G10, G7 has been redefined, as a group. And if we take the latest statistics put together by the International Monetary Fund in its April World Economic Outlook report and measure the size of the economies, clearly we do have right now China very, very much close to approach being the first and the largest economy. So in taking the numbers, it represents 15% of the world economy versus 18.7% the US. So it's literally trailing behind. And more importantly is, India and China combined are larger than the US. And if we just include Japan, as Alberta really highly stressed, Asia is becoming a power force. That's here to change, with or without Eurozone situations, with or without the financial market correction that we're just experiencing over the last month or so in emerging markets. So that's here to stay. And within the Americas, the powerhouse clearly is Brazil. And I was fascinated to read yesterday that the Fed put together, told us the amount of foreign holdings of US Treasury securities. And it was fascinating to observe that China becomes the largest foreign holder. We knew that. Japan trailing behind. But then Brazil has $240 billion of US Treasuries, has 4 times more the amount of Treasury securities than Canada has, and 7 times more than what Mexico has, which means that who would have thought, back in the 80s when Brazil was the subject of the debt crisis, that today is one of the most relevant, not the most relevant creditors to the US. Okay? So the issue of leverage is very important at the time of understanding flows and structural change, both in high-income traditional countries and emerging market economies. So that's one thing that I always will highlight. Brazil, within the Americas has become a major force. It was also, trailing what Warren has said, if we just put numbers in terms of growth and within the new G10 category, clearly the BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, are part of the G10. And then the other economies are the traditional, as you know, US, Japan, Germany, UK, France, and Italy. So within that, they are growing much faster, but also inflation is growing much faster. And inflation is growing much faster, and that has been an issue of, let's say, monitoring and concern by both global economic credit analysts and investors as well, and Jonathan can just give us a lot of tone on that. On the debt and fiscal situations as well, it's different. But then there, it is quite uneven. And we have been reading and hearing a lot about India lately, because India, within the emerging market world, is showing signs of macroeconomic imbalances and need to be adjusted. They have massive twin deficit positions, and of course, the currency market has reacted in pure economics and finance 101 fashion, and have been just showing that type of distress. And again, that can be shown. But structurally, the debt situation is much better in most of the emerging market economies, and much, much, much better, I said much 3 times, in Latin America. Who would have thought again, 20, 30 years ago when we were all living, I remember when I was at university, not teaching in Canada, but studying in Argentina, that inflation in that country was 5,000%, okay? And that was in Argentina. And Brazil, that today is just the La Niña Bonita of the region, the inflation rate was 3,000%, again, 3,000, 3 zeros, okay? So let's quickly just focus on our view on Latin America. I know that I'm going very fast, and I have only 9 minutes and 57 cents, so minutes. This conceptual trends that we see in our view for Latin America mostly apply to other regions in Asia. First, the whole concept of resilience and preparedness to deal with the external shocks that we're seeing. Europe is in profound structural transformation, but it's not apocalyptic at all. It would be just naive to believe that. But it will take longer, the structural shift and the transformation, and Greece is the first step, and maybe the Iberian countries are the next one, and then go on. So for the first time, the core countries in the Latin American region are in systemically terms very well prepared to deal with those shocks. As a general observation, the central banks count on $700 billion in reserves to intervene, and offset perhaps, the damaging volatility that we're seeing in their securities markets, particularly in the exchange rate. Capital markets are not very well developed in Latin America yet. Again, Jonathan can give us, a great lecture on that. Perhaps with a relevant exception of Brazil, who is probably the deepest and the one who has the breadth and a more diversified structure. But really, it is a region in ongoing transformation, and we are very, very positive on the growth outlook. Inflation and monetary regimes are convergence in the financially integrated group of countries: Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Uruguay. Even those who are seen as periphery distressed economies as Argentina and Venezuela, I would say that have the ability just to receive the positive contagion from neighbors in the next few years and modify their policy mix that is not the right one. Then the growth dynamics within the region are uneven. Not every country is growing at the same speed. There is a bit of a north-south divide going on within the developing Americas. Mexico, most Central American countries, and to a lesser degree Colombia, more influenced by US economic and monetary policy dynamics. And then the South, of course, influenced by their own South American intra-regional zone dynamics. Everyone in South America, in Brazil, in Chile, and Peru, they all believe that China is the driving factor of their future. I disagree. There is a key driving factor, but not the only one. Their own markets are also a driving factor. Brazil has its own local market just to grow at very, very fast rates. On top of that, if Brazil continues to play a more integrationist role within South America, that extends the marketplace within South America with or without China. But if on top of that, as Warren stressed, China may not grow at 9, may grow at 8. Wow, we'll continue to grow and demand commodities and be foreign investors and foreign creditors in Latin America, and all will benefit. Again, growth is in this region to stay at an even pace, but it's positive. I talked about the monetary regimes and the countries that may be, outsiders like Venezuela and Argentina, but I think it's the opportunity just to align to the positive fundamental shifts are great. Then one thing is very important. The US is a relevant factor for Latin America. So the US, not only in terms of the economic cycle in which Mexico will be mostly influenced, but rather the monetary cycle, the intervention of the US Treasury, of the Federal Reserve, in the U.S. Treasury market and the U.S. yield curve. That is perhaps positive for the U.S. because it will just create, a better employment outlook and address some of the credit-related issues. But for Latin America, it's great because they're not creating an incentive to put the money outside of their own countries. There is no incentive whatsoever right now to capital flows leave their own countries because of the interest rate differentials and because of their own positive growth dynamics. I think there's great momentum still in the region in the next 10 years. And of course, there's going to be, in my humble estimation, there's going to be a bit of a phase of differentiation within the emerging markets, both in Asia and in Latin America. As we saw right now with the situation in India, India has been downgraded, the credit rating outlook recently by one of the rating agencies, twin deficits, a country that needs just to follow what's going on in other countries in distress, that Europe, just to see that they can avoid that situation. So finally, one thing that I want to talk is about flows. And in this, if I may, we as global economists, we address a lot of variables. Some of them are qualitative, some of them are quantitative in nature. We call it hard. We call it high-frequency economic data. But there are a lot of soft issues going on as well. I don't know if you have not noticed, but countries such as Spain, which is similar to the size of the Kenyan economy, are running youth unemployment rates of around 40 to 50%. Again, between the ages of 18 and 24. And those people are not sitting in front of their TV sets in Madrid, Barcelona, or Sevilla. They are just living the country. And they're going, this is the type of flow that is soft, but very important. So there are immigration waves that are not triggered by, situations of war or, as we saw, in the 40s or in, early in the last century. This is just economic distress, and the youth, the prepared youth, is eyeing other countries. And you know where they're going? To go into the Americas. We've seen them in Canada, and we're seeing them in countries in South America a lot. Even in countries such as Argentina, Spanish are going to study at med school, just to give you an idea of examples. So again, that type of flow that, when we're seeing the structural transformation going on, follow what the youth is doing. Then we have the capital flows. And as I said before, capital flows can take different shapes. And of course, and I'm sure Ambassador Ryczynski will stress this, I think the best type of flows that any given nation state would like to attract is the equity flows. And within the equity flows, of course, Jonathan will highlight this, it's great the portfolio side, but as a country, we want the foreign direct investment. And the foreign direct investment flows are still going to emerging markets, and within Latin America, even countries that are growing are being foreign direct investor providers. For instance, I think there has not even started Brazil as a major FDI supplier. As I said before, Brazil has become a prominent creditor of the US economy, the single largest debtor in the world. Right, Warren? So, and then there's a lot of these FDI flows that will support, the economic growth of these countries with or without China. So, and as we said before, we believe in the China growth outlook as 8 plus minus for the next 2 years. We believe that their inflation is contained. There will be continue just to demand commodities, and that will have spillover effects on commodity linked not only currencies, countries such as Canada, Chile, Peru, but then there are a lot of intra-regional growth dynamics, both in Asia and both in Latin America. And there are countries of relevance in Latin America. Brazil has become a key axis, of stability, growth, potential for investments. And as I said before, the type of flows, they're great. Then there are the debt flows, the multilateral financial flows, the commercial lending flows, the bond issuance flows. But usually, in my 20 years of experience following emerging markets, living in a number of countries, I think that the best flows are not necessarily the debt flows. Debt flows follow countries in distress. So what we're seeing that in Europe right now, everyone is talking about the situation of the fiscal standing of these countries that need to attract flows because they have to refinance debt. But debt refinancing is not the solution for structural problems. Growth is. So we have just to focus where the growth is. And as I said before, soft issues such as where the young and the youth employers, the ones who are just going to be driving the new economy worldwide, are going. With those remarks, I leave it here. Thanks for listening.